What's going on, guys? Alan here with Parrots&Co, and I got my Senegal Parrot, Elfie, with me here today. And in this quick video, I want to talk about why your parrot doesn't want to train. Maybe you are trying to teach your parrot to step up, to learn a new trick. Maybe you're trying to teach your bird indoor flight recall, but for whatever reason, it's just not sticking. Either your bird is distracted, or it doesn't really seem interested, or you try to ask it to step up and instead it starts licking and chewing your fingers, or you try to ask it to do a specific trick and maybe it's not even interested in the treat, right? So let's talk about that here today. And really the kind of philosophy and the foundation that I really approach parrot training, especially with Elfie, is a concept that I call BIRD, and it stands for bridge, intrinsic, reinforcement, and desire. So we'll dive into all those in just a second. But when it comes to the whole acronym, we're gonna go kind of out of order, but I promise we'll loop it all back together so it makes sense. So let's start with intrinsic from that acronym BIRD. Now, really what I define as intrinsic is your bird's fundamental or basic needs, right? Sleep, safety, security, the bond, feeling that trust around you is gonna be the most important thing, because if a bird doesn't trust you, if you go to try to get out of its cage or interact with it and it's trying to fly away from you, it's flailing in the cage, obviously extreme signs of it being uncomfortable, it doesn't matter what you try, your parrot isn't gonna have that fundamental need of food, safety, security, and trust with you. So no matter what you do to try to train your bird, whether it's target training or indoor flight recall, it's just gonna be an uphill battle the whole time. So even with humans, right, we want to have those basic needs down, whether that's a house to live in or shelter, having food so that we're not worried about eating all the time, and just really having that security before we can think about anything else. And it's the very same principle and foundations with your parrot, right? So making sure that it has proper sleep, getting at least 12 hours of sleep uninterrupted. It's got proper nutrition, so it's eating the right foods every day. And then on top of that, we're spending quality time with your parrot or building trust with it over time so that it doesn't feel like interacting with you is maybe a negative thing. So intrinsic is the first thing from the acronym BIRD. Now, once you have that checked off and you have the intrinsic, checked off, meaning, hey, my bird's getting sleep, it's eating good food, it is trusting me, or it's not afraid of me, right? Then we look at bridge, right? The B in the BIRD acronym. And bridge, really what that stands for is like the ability for you to communicate with your parrot. So maybe you're not communicating with it properly. Now, what do I mean by that? So when we are trying to train a parrot to perform a certain behavior that we want or unlearn bad ones, we have to give it a reason, or not a reason, a way to know that it's doing what we want and it's gonna get what it wants in exchange for that behavior. So fundamentally, if you think of something like target and clicker training, what that does with the clicker is it establishes the bridge. When you hear this click, you're gonna get a reward. When you touch this end of this chopstick or the stick, you're gonna hear a click and then get a reward. So we're directing it toward what we want it to do, and we're reaffirming or reinforcing positively with maybe like a treat, the behaviors that we want. So if you don't have target training and clicker training dialed in, your bird is not gonna know what you want, or that performing X behavior is gonna get its desired result, whether that's the form of a snack or just being with you. Some birds don't even interact with snacks as much as they will just having their favorite human around. That's a kind of form of positive reinforcement. And then from there we have desire, right? Now in the acronym BIRD, bridge, intrinsic, reinforcement, desire, the desire component really comes down to a fundamental question for your bird. What's in it for me? That's what you should ask yourself when you are trying to get into the mind frame of your parrot. Now, what's in it for me is very interesting because it has kind of like three components that go into it. So let's say you're trying to ask your parrot to step up and it's like really not interested in the snack that you're gonna give it, or for whatever reason it's kind of getting distracted. Well, there's a few factors that goes into that, right? Number one, do you have a bridge? Are the intrinsic needs met? Yes, yes. Okay, now let's look at the desire. Like, how can we increase the desire for your parrot to want to work toward getting the, desired positive reinforcement or snack that it wants? Number one from that is treat selection, right? If the treats you're using to feed your parrot or give to your parrot in exchange for performing a behavior you want isn't what it wants, then it's going to be less motivated to want to work for it. So if your bird really doesn't like fruit as much and you're trying to use fruit, but it really, really loves almonds or pine nuts maybe, and you have those like number one or number two snacks that you use for your bird that you didn't know were its favorite, well, if you're using something that it doesn't like, you're kind of fighting an uphill battle in that sense, right? So the proper treat selection is going to be very important. For Alfie, he loves almonds and he loves cashews, and then the ones that are kind of like number 3 and number 4 would probably be pine nuts. So when I'm teaching him a new behavior, I use his number 1, and when it's a repetitive behavior like whistle or wave, he kind of gets the pine nuts because, he's not going to always get the number 1 for things that he already knows how to do. So treat selection is important in the desire component. And you see Alfie getting excited because he actually knows what that word means. And usually when I say that, he thinks it's time for a training session. So he's like, where the snack at? Where the snack at, Bird Bay? I want one. So he's kind of looking around like, where is it? And as I'm moving my hands, he's kind of like looking down because sometimes I reach in my pocket and then he's like, what you got for me? Let's do this. But so yeah, you have treat selection, and then from there you have the actual like food management, or not even food management, but I would say more like a feeding schedule. So if your bird has unlimited access to food, the reality is that there's going to be a lower probability of it wanting to work for something because it's not really hungry. That's like, there's no reason. Or on the opposite end, if it has unlimited access to like seeds and nuts on a seed and nut diet, or you have snacks available to it that you're going to try to use for training sessions, it lowers the value of that so-called snack that you're going to use for training session, therefore impacting its desire. So for example, if I'm feeding Alfie a healthy chopped diet in the morning, I really just have that for his breakfast, and then in the afternoon as a healthy cold pressed pellet, for example. Well, when it comes time to train, there's going to be a very high probability that he's going to be very interested in working for his favorite snacks because he doesn't have access to them readily. And then the other component of feeding schedule is really just making sure that the weight is right, because if your bird is overweight and it has unlimited access to food, there's even lower probability that it's going to want to do anything to work for that desired snack that it wants. So that's the other component that kind of goes into the feeding schedule. Now for every bird it's going to be different. There's usually a rough range. Like for Senegal parrots, they tend to be anywhere from like 120. I've seen them all the way up to like 140, 145. And just because one weighs X and the other one weighs Y, doesn't mean that one of them is lower in weight or the other one is higher. That one of them is less healthy and that one of them is more healthy or overweight and underweight, not to get you guys confused. But it just means that even within that same species of bird, there can be fluctuation. So it really just comes down to like weighing your bird consistently and then figuring out what that baseline is every morning after morning poops. That's what I do with Alfie, to know where he's at. And so that's going to be important for increasing that desire. And then lastly, within the category of desire is really making sure that your parrot has the right timing for that training session. If Alfie has just finished eating his morning breakfast or his afternoon pellets, and I try to train him right after that, there's a low probability that he's going to be focused or very interested, right? So I always like to do it either first thing in the morning before my bird eats, or before his second feeding. I'll try to time that training session to maximize the potential that he's going to be interested. Now he's so conditioned to training now that he'll literally eat his chop or eat his afternoon pellets that he doesn't care. He's like, oh, is it time for training? Let's fly, let's eat. I don't care, I'll eat some more. So he's a little bit different now because it's been a few years of this. And then from there, the last component is reinforcement, right? Very, very important. So bridge, intrinsic, reinforcement, desire, the reinforcement component of the acronym BIRD, right? So reinforcement is interesting because really what reinforcement is doing is there's kind of four foundations to it. There's positive reinforcement, meaning for you performing X behavior, you're gonna get a desired reward that you want. And this is the form and fashion of like clicker or target training. Then, clicking that clicker, getting a reward. That's an example of positive reinforcement. And then there's minus reinforcement or negative reinforcement, or sometimes even like accidental reinforcement, where a great example of this is your bird's yelling, trying to get out of the cage, and then you go and you say, shut up, or you go and you squirt it with the water bottle, or you go and you like try to cover its cage. Well, what that does is it tells your bird, without you knowing, that it's desiring you coming into the room. It desires your presence. So it thinks, oh, because I yelled, I got my human to come in. Now I'm gonna do more of that. And what ends up happening is there's this cycle of like, it gets worse and worse and worse. So that's one thing that we have to watch out for. And sometimes we don't even know that we're doing it, right? The other one is called minus punishment, which is basically the concept of taking away a desire or desired situation your parrot wants to be in, if it is performing a behavior that we don't want. So typically I always say, hey, 80% of the time we're gonna be using positive reinforcement in training. It goes a long way and it builds that bond. It's a win-win for everyone. And then on the minus reinforcement side, or excuse me, minus punishment side of things, I very seldom use that. So I'll give an example. Let's say that I'm asking for Elfie to come to me and I'm calling him for a flight recall, and I call him more than 2 times and he's just kind of like looking around, or he's not really interested. Meh. Okay, well, what I'll do in that instance is I'll remove the ability for him to earn a reward by simply turning around and maybe turning my back to him and ignoring him for 30 seconds. And he kind of learns, oh, dang, I lost the opportunity for that snack. So then when I turn back around and I ask him to do it again, he comes in that first instance. Boom, he comes right away. So that's kind of an example of like minus punishment, where he lost the opportunity to earn that treat. And as a result of that, I turned around, reset, came back, and then his end result that he got is like positive reinforcement. And then from there, the last one that I would never recommend that we really use ever is positive punishment. And with parrots, it's very interesting because with like a dog, naturally what other dogs will do, because they're pack animals and they're predators, which is very interesting, is like sometimes you'll see like these like dog trainers, or even like example Cesar Milan, like what is it called? He'll do like a touch to like snap him out of it, and it's not like physical abuse, but he's like checking the dog to snap him out of like whatever focus it's in. Or dogs will do that naturally, where if one dog acts up, the alpha will come up and basically pin it down and regulate it, kind of like a form of like positive punishment. But the thing is, it doesn't work with birds, because birds are number one, non-domesticated, so they don't care to please humans. They're wild in their nature. And number two, birds are prey animals. So if you try to hit your bird, intimidate it, if you try to squirt it with a water bottle, if you maybe you're accidentally forceful, or you do something that is actually scaring the bird, even if it's maybe not even your intention, what can happen is that will be the fastest track to you building the trust that you establish with your bird over the years or over time, and making the relationship go backwards, because it's either going to respond, number one, by becoming afraid of you, or two, it's going to become aggressive toward you. So never use positive punishment, but I bring it up because it's also important to know that we may accidentally be doing that with our birds, and maybe we don't even know, right? So this is why if your bird's yelling and you come in and you squirt it with the water bottle, it's going to be like, well, why'd you squirt me? I was just yelling, and it doesn't associate the yelling with the squirting of the water bottle. Henceforth, it either becomes afraid of the water in the water bottle, or it starts becoming angry and afraid of you. So I hope this didn't confuse you too much, but I like to break it down in that acronym of BIRD, and really kind of looking at it from all those angles. And really, when you have the bridge, intrinsic reinforcement, and desire dialed in, there's a very, very, very high probability that we're going to be able to train your parrot to the degree that you want it to be, or we're working toward, unlearning those bad behaviors, learning those desired behaviors, and building a long-lasting relationship with your parrot. And for whatever you guys, for whatever reason you feel like, hey, this is something that I want more information on, I want to learn more on, or hey, Alan, like how can I potentially learn more on, reducing aggression, stopping the screaming, or working toward building my developing my bird into like my kind of dream bird or long-term ideal bird, so to speak, so that I can build a good relationship over time, and you're open to getting some help on that, then hey, it's no problem. Check out the free training video that I put below. It's a free parrot training video. It's in the description below. Check that out. And if you want to chat a little bit further, you can watch that full video, book a time to chat, and then we can speak and see if it's, there's some synergy, or if there's any, at the very least, any insights that I can give you that you can walk away with. But that's it for this video. Alfie and I signing out. We'll see you guys next time.